That revered philosopher, Jerry Halliwell, once said, "Everyone has a mad half hour once a month." Unfortunately for you, we get it once a week.
This is Partners in Crime with Adam Croft and Robert Dawes.
Episode 55 this week, Bob, and possibly, I work out, it might be the penultimate episode to be recorded in this studio.
How exciting. I've just walked past the front of your house and there are two sparkling brand new windows where a garage used to be.
Yes. It's work is gathering apace.
Yes. Looking in there, it's sort of full of builders, of course, and sawdust and cement at the moment, but it will soon be the home of crime fiction's Smashie and Nicey.
It will be, yeah. It should be finished next week, hopefully. Then we've got a bit of decorating and kitting out to do. But yeah, I reckon probably this week and next week's episode's in here. And I don't know, should we have a farewell party? Do you do that? Well, I mean, I'm only moving downstairs.
Yeah, well, I think so. We can have an extra cup of coffee. Maybe a cappuccino as a special treat with a little bit of chocolate on top.
Shall we?
Yeah, push the boat out.
I could chuck some matcha in my green tea. And
there's no need for that.
Yes. But yeah, with all that going on and me trying to concentrate amongst all the noise, I've not got much reading done. By the way, I should apologise if you do hear any weird bangs or noises or electric saws, any more than the usual me headbutting the microphone this week, then that is due to the ongoing works. But all in the... I don't know what I was going to say. All the
Call of Duty, I think, is what you were possibly going to say.
Close enough.
But you've got a busy time coming up. Next week you're at the London Book Fair, which is...
I am.
I guess it's the premier publishing event of the year in the UK, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's a bit of an odd one. It's held at Olympia in London. It's weird. I mean, Olympia's massive. You walk in. That was my chair, by the way. You walk in, and all the big publishers are there, and the big agents, and everything there on the main floor by the door, standing there, all nice polished suits, and nobody else really there. And it's this kind of steady stream of people going up the stairs, along the balcony in the mezzanine, round a corner, through another little corridor, and into this room which they've kind of hidden away the best they possibly can. It's quite a large room, which is Author HQ. Which is where all the indie stuff happens, where all the authors hang out.
I see.
And that is absolutely teeming with people each year.
Oh, is it? Is this independent writers only?
Well, I think everyone's welcome.
Yes,
but it's basically focused on the indie author side of things.
Oh, right.
And that's always absolutely teeming with people, and it's quite funny, really, actually seeing that. They still kind of hide us away up there and pretend we don't exist, whilst that's really where...
You feel a little bit Rochester's wife about it, do you? Yes, I see. Well,
if Rochester's wife was getting all the visitors.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. But you say that, you're talking next week. What are you going to be talking about? It's not the wildlife of Ethiopia, I take it. You are giving...
I think it might get a brief mention, but largely about... it's all very boring publishing-related stuff, which most people probably aren't interested in. But, it's very much kind of industry stuff. But I'll be having a talk there at Olympia on Wednesday, and meeting up with some other authors, having lunch with and drinks with Rachel Amphlett as well at one point, the sometimes host of Partners in Crime. When you go off on your jollies,
welcome she is, I have to say.
I'm going to take some recording equipment down with me and hopefully grab a few crime writers who might have a chat with me, might not.
I'm sure they will. You're a perfectly respectable looking type of chap in the flesh.
Yeah, so next week's episode might go out slightly late. Might go out a day or two late. Might be at the weekend instead, by the time we've got all these interviews all pulled together and put in there. But fingers crossed.
Well, I mean, that sounds very exciting. I'm not going because I can't, and because I haven't been invited. But I mean, that's my reasons. But it sounds absolutely fascinating.
Well, that's the only reason I'm going.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, good. Go and represent Partners in Crime.
I wondered what you were going to say then.
Yeah, well, Anyway, we're going to move on with our recommendations for this week,
Go on, then.
ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, throughout the world. We've actually been looking at our stats for Partners in Crime a little earlier on, before I move on to that. It's absolutely fascinating. I didn't realise we had a listener in Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan. Hello there.
Tanzania as well.
Tanzania, yes. Well, I knew about I thought I knew about Tanzania, but that's absolutely splendid. And the fact that you can track these stats, and
we are watching you.
Yeah,
while you listen to us.
Oh, it's mind-boggling. It's very nice. So anyway, it's lovely to know that there are people out there listening to us, and that we may possibly be of some use. I'm sure we amuse and bemuse in equal measure across the globe. But anyway, I've got my first recommendation this week is a very exciting television series. I'm beside myself with this one. It's the one I've been waiting for a while. It's subtitled, of course, as it seems to me increasingly all the best television is. Now, there's a contentious thing to say, is it not? But that's what I tend to find. I mean, some of my favourite, certainly crime series have been Danish, Swedish, Norwegian, Spanish, French, of course. We won't go into that one again.
Let's not talk about that one.
And now Italian. Sky Atlantic have got a series called The Miracle playing at the moment, and it aired on February the 26th in the UK at 9 p.m. On, as I say, Sky Atlantic. I don't know what platforms it will be available on around the world, but it is a Sky co-production between them and Art France and several other production companies, and I think it's an absolutely brilliant series. It is written by the Italian writer Niccolo Aminiti, who is a successful novelist in Italy, and it is in Italian with English subtitles. That's the way we see it in the UK anyway, and it's got a fantastic conceit. Aof Hans in the Bustle has written, when you see the words mystery and drama in the same description, it is about to be, it's about to be violent, and those with a distaste for gore best look away. But what if the blood wasn't quite where you expected it to be from? Well, there we are. That is the question which this series begins to answer. And believe me, it hooks you from the very first scene when Italian police, it's all set in Rome, by the way, my favourite city, I have to admit, and the whole series is infused with Rome. The colour, the light, the history of Rome is very much in the background and very much a part of the texture of the series. But what happens is, during a police raid of a mafioso boss in Rome, the armed police come across an extraordinary discovery. Deep in the basement, the mafioso boss is naked and covered in blood. They open another door, and there before them is a sculpture of the Virgin Mary. And that sculpture is crying blood. Now, anyone who has any understanding of Catholicism, or Catholics themselves, will know that is an extremely poignant and important discovery. And it is hailed, certainly by the experts, the police experts, as a miracle. It is not made public, of course. And that is what this is all about. Is it real? Is it really this sculpture of the Virgin Mary crying blood? Well, it would seem to. There's an analogy that they use, that the laws of physics say that when you squeeze an orange and the juice comes out, that the juice will never weigh more than the actual orange itself. But this sculpture is actually, through its tears, producing litres upon litres upon litres upon litres of blood, far outweighing the actual weight of this very ordinary, it's made of plastic, I think, statue of the Virgin Mary. So it is hidden away in the depths of police headquarters, and the Prime Minister of Italy is called to see it, as is a friend of his who is a priest. And that is a dilemma. It seems to be real. And the question that this series poses is, what if it is real? What if this is a genuine miracle? What will be the effect of that on the people of Italy, on the people of the world, on the church, on politics, and it's a very, very big question. And I'm halfway through at the moment, and I'm hoping that they've got the guts to actually take it as far as they possibly can. It's a fascinating, brilliantly acted piece of drama, thoroughly engrossing. So I think you've probably got the message from me that the miracle on Sky Atlantic is worth catching. Well, I don't know. Again, I don't know where Sky plays in America. I should find that out, I guess. But catch it if you can. It's absolutely brilliant. Don't mind the subtitles. If you speak Italian, all the better. But it's absolutely great. So catch it if you can.
This is one of those weird things that happens on Partners in Crime. I didn't know you were going Italian today, you see. Because, I mean, this may come as a surprise to you listeners, but we never planned any of this. We have no kind of pre-show meetings.
That's blatantly obvious to anyone, any regular viewer.
But you will see now, as I go into my pile of books here that I have for recommendations this week,
yes.
This particular one.
Oh, my favourite.
Which is August Heat by Andrea Camilleri. It's an Inspector Montalbano mystery. This was my first introduction to Montalbano. I think we mentioned it once or twice in the past,
yes,
but not as a direct recommendation.
I've recommended a few of his books. I'm very, very, very fond.
It's brilliant. They're a fairly short read, but I love it, and it's so atmospheric as well. I'm going to read the back blurb because I'm going to be lazy like you do on these things, and I'm not going to prepare anything. I'm just going to read off the back.
Blurb away.
It says, in the lazy, slow month of August, Inspector Montalbano and his girlfriend Livia prepare for a relaxing holiday in a villa he has found for them. It is, he assures her, far too hot for anything exciting to happen. But when Livia's friend's young son goes missing, a series of events is sparked, which will certainly ruin the Chief Inspector's pleasant interlude. A secret apartment and a grisly find in an old trunk are just the beginning. Montalbano must navigate his way through the case, as well as coping with the sweltering heat, the suspicious death of an Arab labourer, and the tempting lure of a beautiful girl. Now, this is one of the most atmospheric books I think I've ever read. It was what got me into the Montalbano books. It's perfect, I think, especially this weather where it's turned a little bit cold now here in the UK again after our warm week that we had, which I think was summer. It's ideal for just curling up somewhere, not looking out the window and pretending you are in Italy in the warmth with the sun beating down on you in August.
I agree, and I have to say that blurb is very interesting. I've often been described as a grisly find in an old trunk. But there we are. I agree with you. Nothing better. Certainly on a Mediterranean holiday or holiday in the sun, the perfect sort of read if you like your crime thriller. I'm a great fan of his, and good. That's a great recommendation. I haven't. What was that one called?
That's August Heat.
Not read that one.
Andrea Camilleri. Oh, well, there you go.
There we are.
Bring it back next week.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. Right.
If you like the sound of any of the books we talk about on this show, by the way, as a listener to Partners in Crime, you can actually save a huge amount on books.
Can you?
Yes, by buying from Kobo. If you are an existing listener to Partners in Crime, then head over to kobo.com, find the books you want to buy, and if you enter the promo code PARTNERS at the checkout, they'll knock 40% off of your purchases for you. I think you can use that code as many times as you like, up to I think $30 per purchase, so you can come back time and time again and keep buying books and getting 40% off. May I suggest ours?
Well, yes. Please do.
Please come and buy our books. August Heat there by Andrea Camilleri. And if you're a new listener to Partners in Crime, if you've not yet claimed your discount with Kobo, you get an even better one. As a new listener to Partners in Crime, a new customer to Kobo, enter the promo code CRIME at the checkout, and they'll give you 90% off. And you can use Partners from then on and get your 40% off moving forward, which is brilliant. And you don't need an e-reader device or anything like that. The Kobo e-readers are brilliant, but if you just download the free app for your mobile phone, for your tablet, or even for your computer, you can read your books on there and basically get nearly half-price reading for the rest of your life.
What is there not to like?
Nothing.
Exactly.
Absolutely
well, there
nothing.
we are. Well, there we are. Thank you very much, Kobo, as per. So here, I've been delving back into my previous reading history, and I've been rereading what I think is an absolute classic. It is John le Carré, and it is The Honourable Schoolboy. For fans of John le Carré, it is probably one of him writing at the top of his form, which invariably he does, but I think it's an extraordinary book. It is the second part of the John le Carré Carla trilogy, the battle of wits between spy master George Smiley and his Russian adversary Carla, takes on an even more dangerous dimension in The Honourable Schoolboy. George Smiley, now acting head of the circus, British intelligence, must rebuild its shattered reputation after one of the biggest betrayals in its history. Using the talents of journalist and occasional spy Jerry Westerby, Smiley launches a risky operation uncovering a Russian money laundering scheme in the Far East. His aim: revenge on Carla, head of Moscow Centre and the architect of all his troubles. Well, the Times described this as full of energy, compassion, rich and overwhelming sweep of character and action. The New York Times, a remarkable sequel to Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. The achievement is in the characters, major and minor, all burned on the brain of the reader. This is the sixth George Smiley novel. I think it's my favourite. Obviously, there's Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy as part of the first book of this particular Carla trilogy. The Honourable Schoolboy is the second book, and Smiley's People the third. I just think it's a great work of literature in its own right. Of course, if you start reading the beginning, the first George Smiley books, I think, well, I suppose the first one is, of course, The Spy That Came In From the Cold. But if you just took the trilogy, for instance, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy and all those three books, you would actually benefit from the huge resonance and depth of le Carré's writing and his brilliant character and situations. He's a marvellous ability for suspense and intrigue, and the huge detail that he goes into about the intelligence services ability to actually get information in a time of the Cold War. It's brilliant. I mean, intelligence has changed, as we all know. We all look and read on and listen on the news to what's happening now. It's internet, it's all sorts of different ways of gaining intelligence. So this is very much a period piece. The basis of intelligence, though, I was speaking to someone who has actually worked for MI6, who said on the basic level, things remain pretty much the same. It still comes down to human beings in the field in this dark, mysterious and dangerous world of international espionage. But so that hasn't changed so much. But it is obviously an historical novel now. But I think it's one of the greats. It's one of my all-time favourites, and devouring it again for this is the third time. I have to say, I just think it's a fantastic piece of literature, and I can recommend it. Can you read it as a standalone? Of course you can. It's an extraordinary book in its own right. But go back at least to the first of the trilogy, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, because that will lead you in marvellously, and you'll be I mean, that's the book, that's a trilogy to take on holiday. Wherever you're going on holiday, take that away with your Camilleri as well for slightly lighter relief. But great writing by one of I think our greatest writers, John le Carré. Honourable Schoolboy, get it on Kobo, why don't you?
I was just reading something in the news, actually, about foreign fiction in general. We were talking about Italian fiction there. It reminded me of a news story that I've just pulled up that I saw earlier in the week by Alison Flood in The Guardian. The headline being, "Translated fiction enjoys sales boom as UK readers flock to European authors." On the eve of Brexit, figures show unprecedented numbers of Britons are turning to translations of continental novels. As Brexit looms and the UK faces a future outside the EU, the country's readers are gulping down European fiction at an unprecedented rate, with sales at their highest since records began.
Wow.
So we are turning heavily, it seems, towards European fiction.
And that's all types of fiction, not just crime.
All types of fiction, yes, but crime is absolutely included. I mean, the crime fiction has kind of been ahead of the curve, really, as far as that's concerned. Because I mean, Andrea Camilleri, as we spoke of there, Stieg Larsson, going back to the beginnings of the kind of the Nordic invasion, if you like, of
your Nesbos.
Joe Nesbo, exactly. Yes,
exactly.
It's I mean, I'm looking at my bookshelves here, and it's filled with European authors, and it's Henning Mankell, for example, the Wander series. So it's, it's been going for a while, and I think crime fiction's perhaps been ahead of the curve in that in that respect. We tend to have adapted, I think, to foreign European authors much more quickly. So that's now across the board.
There's been an explosion since the days of Georges Simenon and Maigret being the only crossovers from Europe or whatever.
The closest you got to European fiction before then was probably Hercule Poirot. We had a foreign character. That was probably about the closest you got, wasn't it?
And is it centred on Europe or is it worldwide?
European, mainly. European. Yeah, the article seems to suggest that it's European authors that we're flocking to in terms of wider books and wider literature. So,
gosh,
crime fiction ahead of the curve again there.
Yeah, well,
and I thought it was just an interesting thing to bring into the mix.
Yes.
What with talk of Italy. So
does it work the other way, I wonder?
I hope so. I hope so, because I've just sold Italian rights to some of my books.
Oh, have you?
So I really do hope so.
Oh, there we are. That's a miracle.
Yeah, and French.
Sorry.
And in France, that came out in January. Her Last Tomorrow came out in France. So as I found out when I don't know where I've put them actually, but I had about 30 French copies of my book turned up, and I've no idea what to do with them because I don't speak French. Well, I presume it's my book.
Yeah. Well, a friend of mine, Chris Lang, who writes, I've forgotten the wonderful crime series on ITV in this country. He is actually writing a series that are made in France and set in France.
Brilliant.
Now, there's a changing market, not just in books, but in sort of across the medium. So that's interesting.
Yes. I do have another recommendation, actually. I've got two books to recommend. These are, again, they're not ones that I've read this week, but ones I have read in a not-so-distant past, and I feel I should recommend because I haven't focused on them on Partners in Crime. This one is non-fiction. This is a book by Christian Plowman, who was an undercover police officer with the Metropolitan Police. So he was, chasing down big drugs gangs and trafficking organisations and all sorts of things where, undercover policing is needed. It's called Crossing the Line, Losing Your Mind as an Undercover Cop. And it's been in the news over the past few years here in the UK, the ethics of undercover policing.
Yes.
I think it hit the news a few times that I think there was a collection of families whose lives had been frankly turned upside down by the discovery that the father of the family wasn't who he'd claimed to be, and he was actually an undercover police officer, and that he'd been sort of living this lie. There were women who had children with undercover police officers who had only met them because they were being investigated effectively. And the thing is, an undercover police officer, there's a lot of things that people don't realise. Like, there's this belief all around the world that if you ask a police officer if he is an undercover police officer, he legally has to say yes. That's a widely held belief, which is obviously complete nonsense. That would be a massive loophole, and that they can't do certain things, like enter into sexual relationships and things like that, because that would compromise them. But in fact, the opposite is true. If they didn't, that would compromise them, because effectively they have to be somebody else completely.
Well, talk about lines being crossed. I've seen this in several television dramas where they've explored this idea of the undercover agent that goes by their own volition, or indeed ordered to go too far to cross that line, enter into a relationship, pretend not only just to be draw people in a very, very deceptive way to get the information that is considered necessary. So that's interesting. But this guy is the real McCoy.
He's been there and done it, yeah. And the book is called Crossing the Line by Christian Plowman, and there's a thin blue line there through the title. And as you say, that as you alluded to when you were speaking there, the title does have double meanings. You've got the thin blue line, you've also got the fact that they have to cross the line and go too far in order to not arouse suspicion, because if they there's lots of talk about should they introduce these laws to say that undercover police officers have to fall short by perhaps not entering into relationships with people, or they have to disclose certain things, and of course that then jeopardises the whole point of them being there. So it's a very tricky subject. I can absolutely see both sides of it. This is this guy, he's very much been there. It's a very interesting story, and it messed him up. There's no doubt about it. Having
I'm
to
not
be these different
surprised.
people and to pretend you are somebody else and to effectively lose your identity. I mean, it's almost going down the lines of these kind of psychological experiments that were done in the 1960s, where people were put into a prison and into a, not a real one, but they were locked up for a month or 2 months, and they were referred to only by number and never by name. And these people slowly started going mad because they'd lost their personal identity. They were all treated the same, treated as a number.
Absolutely lost themselves.
And they lost themselves. Their identity was gone, and the brain just fizzles away. So I think there's probably an element of that in it. It's a fascinating read. I saw it on my bookshelf earlier, and I think I'm going to read it again. So I just opened it on page 145, and it's on a chapter called Penetration Testing.
Oh.
Not the words I expected to see there when I've just opened it again, and on chapter 17, which is called Big Fat Gypsy Headache. So
well, I'm intrigued by the chapter titles alone.
I should probably stop opening that book because it's going to make me corpse.
Because the difference between agent provocateur and undercover and what have you, and of course the undercover process and pretending to be someone that you're absolutely not is accepted practice. Talking about the John le Carré and the world of intelligence gathering and spies, that's accepted practice. That's part and parcel. But it's not so much in the law. There are laws that police officers cannot. I mean, by the time something like that comes to court, traditionally the spy world has other ways of dealing, reaching a conclusion on certain matters like that, which is not, of course, thankfully, available to the police force. Yeah,
it's something that was on TV recently. I can't remember the name of it for the life of me. It's only within the last couple of months, if that. Where there's a guy who was turned by the police, I think, against Islamic extremists, if I'm right. If it was a BBC thing, I can't remember the name of the show now.
Channel 4, I think.
Was it Channel 4?
Yeah. I've forgotten.
That was.
I didn't see it.
That was very, very good. That had a lot of kind of undercover policing in there, and characters who you didn't realise were undercover perhaps until later on. So it just reminded me of that. But this kind of public belief that there are places where they have to stop, or that they go home to their wife and kids at the end of the night and switch off. Once you're that character, you are on. That's it, 24/7 for however long it takes to get that operation completed.
Licensed bigamy.
Well, perhaps,
yes.
It's a fascinating subject.
Well, it's been a rich vein for novelists and television writers. So it'd be interesting to actually read first-hand account from someone who's actually had to pursue those particular courses.
Crossing the line, Christian Plowman. Yeah, it's just. I'd completely forgotten all about it. I'm going to read the back of it, actually.
Please, is there more blood?
There is more blood. Well, we've got 3 minutes to waste as well, so this will do one of them.
I wait with bated.
As he rose through the ranks of various departments of the Metropolitan Police, Christian Plowman dreamt of becoming an undercover cop. When he finally achieved his ambition, becoming one of an elite group of officers, the reality of covert work turned his life into a nightmare. To catch criminals, Christian has bought and sold drugs with taxpayers' money, been beaten up, arrested at gunpoint, and barricaded in a pub by a gang of marauding gypsies, all in a day's work. At one stage, he was running almost a dozen mobile phones to keep track of his different identities, and had so many aliases that he nearly forgot who he was. He put his life on the line for the job, but was to find that being the best of the best wasn't all it was cracked up to be. The pressure became so intense that he even contemplated suicide. Crossing the Line is a visceral, gripping account of what it really takes to be an undercover cop. It exposes how the Met conducts its business behind the scenes and reveals the harsh realities of modern covert police work.
Wow. Sounds like a great read, and a must
great memoir
for
as well.
Crime novelists, possibly, doing the research. Well, that sounds great. Have you ever gone undercover in any capacity?
Only when it's raining. But no, not I can think of. And acting doesn't really count because people know you're undercover. It doesn't.
Yes,
it's not quite the same thing.
They pay to come and see you be undercover.
Yes,
or in the guise of someone else. Well, that's it. Well, there we are. That's this week's Partners in Crime, by the sounds of it.
I think so.
I think we've had a very jolly time, haven't we?
Yeah, we should have London Book Fair special next week.
Yes, we'll take you through our other festival commitments. I think maybe next week, because we've got several coming up through the next 6 months, which may be interesting, which means we're travelling around the country, the UK this is, so maybe you'll be able to come out and see us, and if you're visiting the country, I mean, don't make a special journey from Uzbekistan, or maybe do. Please, you'll be very welcome. It'd be lovely to see you.
Put some effort in. The podcast's free.
That's it.
Put some effort in.
Yes, you can get some very good deals on travel these days. Yes, travellers, follow us around the UK as Partners in Crime goes live, or as live as we get anyway, at various festivals, crime writing festivals.
We might have some news on that front, so hopefully by next week that we might be able to share. We've got something coming up later in the year, which will be a first for Partners in Crime. We think possibly a first for crime writing festivals. So hopefully we can share some details on that soon. But next week back with a London Book Fair roundup. Hopefully some chats with some great crime authors from there, and that might well be the last episode from this studio. It might end up being in our new one then.
Oh, I don't know. I'm beginning to well up.
Partners in Crime was presented by Adam Croft and Robert Dawes and produced by Adam Croft. The theme tune was by the Caesareans. The Partners in Crime logo and imagery were designed by Stuart Beisch. Partners in Crime is sponsored by Kobo, your favourite local bookshop, perfected.